Hello, folks. I wanted to thank you for accepting my video delegation. My name is Brad Evoy. I'm a member of the Hullabaloo Mi'kmaq Nation, and I'm the Executive Director with Disability Justice Network of Ontario. And I'm sending you this to indicate my support for the motion being put forward today to refute the use of the Notwithstanding clause by the Ford government and to continue to defend the rights of all Ontarians. Put bluntly, every use of the Notwithstanding clause to override the charter rights and freedoms of the most marginalized people in our society is a direct and immediate threat against the well-being and safety of all of us. We know that Premier Doug Ford is winding the situation up to fundamentally attack unhoused people, drug users, and disabled Ontarians. The draft legislation that he has prepared and tabled as of Thursday highlights this fact pretty directly. The question before you then is simple. What do you value more? The rights of all Ontarians and your citizens, or the comfort of business owners, homeowners, and NIMBYs? This motion is responding to a wider reactionary campaign against the rights and safety of those already targeted and isolated by society. But also, in opposing the use of the Notwithstanding clause, this constitutional sledgehammer, you would also be increasing your own ability as a municipality to affect change and refuse to give over all power to Doug Ford. If the use of the Notwithstanding clause becomes normalized, this precedent would threaten the abilities of cities like Chatham Kent to govern themselves effectively and turn your council into a rubber stamp for provincial mandates. I would hope that you value the rights of your citizens and your ability to represent them more than appeasing the premier. Ultimately, the reality of the housing crisis and the broader situation around encampments is that the attacks on these communities are attacks on people with disabilities. As the Canadian Human Rights Commission and Office of the Federal Housing Advocate have stated, people with disabilities are more likely to experience homelessness because of violence or abuse. 63% of women with disabilities who experience homelessness in their lifetime said it was because of violence, compared to 54 for women without disabilities. And that ultimately, 53% of people with disabilities who experience homelessness said it was due to violence. Additionally, it is certainly the case that financial hardship is the main reason that people with disabilities have been forced into homelessness, which has been even more so the case since the COVID-19 pandemic began. Ultimately, we also know that the number of unhoused ODSP and OW recipients has doubled since the pandemic began, and that ultimately many more of our unhoused neighbors are kept from these services due to barriers arising from being unhoused. Ultimately, for folks who do have access to OW, even if you are housed, that is only $733 a month. And for folks who are unhoused, they lose access to the housing allotment within that overall funding. So then, folks, I say to you, to solve our interlocking crises of the moment, we need vision, clarity, and a commitment to building up our social system, from accessible housing to social assistance and everything in between. We must not cede possibility to those who would engage in far-right policy and action. Instead, there are very clear things we can do instead of attacking unhoused folks, drug users, migrants, and ultimately disabled folks. We can raise the rates, we can enact rent control, and we can push for that within the provincial context instead of simply engaging in more policing and violence towards our neighbors and community members. Ultimately, with the announced legislation, we now know for certain that that is the tact that the provincial government is looking to use. More powers to police and place disabled folks in prison rather than to engage in actually ensuring that people have housing, that people have access, that people have affordability in this province.